If the bankrupt person is sued, who's the bankrupt one? I'll tell you, even though I told you already. The bankrupt one is the one whose debts are more than his assets. So he's bankrupt and he gets sued. That means all the people he owed, they went to the Muslim judge and they sued him. They said he owes us. We want our money. Then the judge will restrict him. Of course, the judge is going to look into the case and verify that it's the case, that this is true claim. Once it's verified for the judge that he is bankrupt and he owes them money, then what will the judge do? The judge, so if the bankrupt one is sued and the judge restricts him, then this bankrupt person can only spend for his needs. And once he's restricted, the judge rushes to sell his belongings and to distribute the money to the lenders. And he will sell everything if he needs to, and he would leave this one with nothing but a long shirt, a turban, some footwear, a pair of pants, and an apartment. A slave must return what he took. The slave has a master. Who's responsible? The slave is responsible, not the master. Slave stole or did something. The slave is responsible. A slave must return what he took, and whatever perishes becomes a debt on him, on the slave, not the master. Becomes a debt on him sought after emancipation. Once that slave gets freed, then the person can sue him. He can't sue the master. The owner is not forced to sell the slave to pay, because the other person was not forced to deal with the slave. Like here, this scenario, let's say it's not a case of thievery or something. The slave went out and set up a table and hustled and made some money. But you know, a slave can't deal without permission of his master. So he dealt without permission. That means his deals are invalid now. And then a person found out that this was a slave he was dealing with and he wanted his money back. He can't go to the master and say, "You give me my money back. That was your slave." Rather, he has to wait for that slave to become freed. Of course, that means if it ever happens. And why is that? How come this master is not obligated to sell the slave and then pay the fine? The owner is not forced to sell the slave to pay because the other one was not forced to deal with the slave. And then you might ask, what if he didn't know he was a slave? And the answer would be, he should have checked. So that's important. Because otherwise, Yani, without that answer right there, then you're going to be oblivious. You're going to say, I'll deal with anybody. I don't know. I don't know what he is. Is he a slave? Is he free? I don't know. Did he steal? I don't know. So if you want to be clear of these types of things, then know who you're dealing with. Make sure you're dealing with someone who can deal, for example. I mean, it might be awkward. You would say to him, "Are you a slave?" For example, but who knows? Likewise, if the slave destroys property, the penalty is on the slave, not the owner. Like the child, not the parent. Also very important. If the child damages something, who has to pay? The child has to pay, not the parent. So that means you have to go after that child after the child reaches puberty. The parent is not responsible. However, the owner cannot sell that slave without permission of the victim. In case the slave did actually wrong the person, he destroyed his property or stole from him, the owner can't sell the slave without permission of the victim, unless he pays the fine. If he wants to sell the slave, then let him pay the fine. Pay for whatever his slave damaged, or etc. If someone sells what he neither owns nor has authority over it, then the sale is invalid, even if the owner approves later, according to the stronger saying. The stronger saying is, selling someone else's stuff is invalid, even if the owner approves later. The weaker saying is, selling someone else's stuff is pending. It's waiting for the owner to approve. So two sayings. So according to one saying, if, for example, Brother Wazir sold something of mine without asking me and without me telling him to, then it's pending, and then he would tell me, for example, I sold this thing of yours, and then I say, I accept, and then it's valid. And according to the stronger saying, it's just invalid altogether. The woman keeps control over all her properties. We mean here concerning her getting married. Whatever she owns is hers. Her house, her money, etc. Or houses, whatever she has. Like, she could be wealthier than her husband. Like who was dangerously ill but then recovered. His restriction stops. Yani, he keeps control over all of his properties. The woman doesn't have a restriction. Her marriage extends no authority to her husband as far as her money is concerned. So he can't say to her, don't you let Fulan sleep in your house. It's her house. It's not his house. Nor does she gain control over his property, but she has a right to some of his property in the form of spousal support. So she has a right to some of his money, but not any amount of it in particular. Not any portion of his money in particular, she has a right to it. To say this money, not this money. No. But some of his money, she has a right to it because he has to support her as long as she makes herself available to him. Remember the hadith of Hind, the mother of Muawiyah. She said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Sufyan is a miserly man. Can I take from his money without him knowing? Can I take some of his money without telling him? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, take what you and your children need and not more. Bismillah. Now, and to remind you also, the husband cannot stop his wife from making money. He can stop her from leaving his house, and he can't stop her from making money. So as long as those two, if she can do that without leaving his house, if his case that he detained her in his house, but she could find a way to make money despite that, then he can't stop her. It is valid for a child to inherit, of course. So the fact that he didn't reach puberty doesn't mean he can't inherit something. He will inherit it and own it. Yani, some people in the past, they had a misconception. They thought that a child who's below puberty doesn't own anything. That's false. He can own, he just can't deal with what he owns. Like if he got an inheritance, it's his. And he's restricted from spending it until he reaches puberty. And also the child can acquire a stick or a fish or any resource that he finds. Just like all the Muslims. You know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made it forbidden to restrict the public from unowned resources. Unowned resources, like there's a mine somewhere. Nobody owns that land. Let's say you found that mine, an unowned land. Then you can't say it's my mine now. Don't you come around here? No. But what you can do, though, is say, I was here first. Wait till I finish. That's religiously valid. When I'm finished, then you can go mine as much as you want. So who else can take something from the mine? The child can. If he took a diamond, a golden nugget, if he fished a fish, if he found a stick, all of that is his. It's his. He owns it. Yes. Child has no obligations. Say that again. The child? Not the child. Another person. Yeah. He has to wait. He has to wait if. He has to wait if. He has to wait if that's how the mine is. Like two people can't get in there, for example. I mean, Wafi. And when we're saying mine here, we're talking about all kinds of stuff. Could be salt mine, could be gold mine, could be all kinds of stuff. So it is valid for a child to inherit, meaning he will own that money. And it's valid for him to acquire a stick or a fish. He will own that stick or that fish that he fished. And it's valid for a child to intend to worship if he's mumayyiz, has mental discerning. According to Imam Ahmed, the guardian can give permission to the discerning child to deal. Has mumayyiz, mental discrimination, has tamyiz. According to Shafi'i, the guardian cannot give permission to the discerning child to deal. And according to Shafi'i, there's no option but to wait for this child to reach puberty, and then the child can deal. But like we're going to say here, the child can, I'm going to use the word deal. The child can deal under the parent's supervision or the guardian's supervision. And what that means here is that the guardian is the one who's doing the deal. It's just the child's the one who's physically exchanging the money. taking the money, doing the cash register, giving the change back, but under the supervision of the guardian. And the guardian is the one making the deals, saying to the customer, I sell it to you, I buy it from you. And then the child is dealing with the cash. That's fine. To determine the child's maturity in dealing, you have to test the child. How are you going to test the child? You're going to test the child with whatever is your means, like whatever's your expertise or your availability. So if you're a trader, for example, then the trader tests his child in bargaining without the child finalizing the contract. So even you can let him bargain, but it's all under your supervision, and you do the contract when at the end. And the farmer, for example, he will test his child with farming. So if you're something else, you're going to test your child with something else. And the girl is tested with management of the house, like keeping the food away from the mice, for example, and things like this. If he becomes pubescent while religiously mature, and some said fiscally mature, and he is not foolish with his money, his restriction is lifted without a judge, and the male can marry without a guardian. So that's your son reached puberty, then he could do a marriage contract without asking you. The irresponsible can marry and pay zakah with permission, and he may divorce without permission, since that's not an expenditure. Unlike the child and the insane, the child cannot divorce, and the prepubescent child cannot divorce, and the insane cannot divorce. How could the prepubescent child divorce or not divorce? Because it might be married. How could this prepubescent, and who's the one who divorces? It's the boy. So that boy who didn't reach puberty, he might be married. It's possible. So if he was married, then he can't divorce his wife until he reaches puberty. If he was married, it's going to be because his guardian did the contract for him. And why would he do that? For Allah knows what reasons. But this world is a big world, and the cultures are many, and human motivations and needs are many, more than a lot of things that some of us can or have conceived. And some people, they live, for example, in the United States or in Canada, for example, or maybe in Europe. So they think the whole world is like how they see society, what people call Western, quote unquote. All the world is like that. So many things they don't conceive. This religion of ours made us able to think past such bubbles, because the religious rules are universal. Times that's going to be the way you need to deal with a person. That's your approach. I mean, a lot of times it's going to be your approach with dealing with some non-Muslim who doesn't understand something. The base of his misunderstanding is going to be the fact that he's looking at things through the lens of his own culture. He doesn't see more. He lives in a bubble, as they say. So the male child, he can't divorce his wife without being pubescent. He has to reach puberty first. Yeah, it won't be valid. If he said, "You're divorced," she's not divorced. Also, the insane person, his divorce is invalid until he can think again. Except whose insanity was due to sinful drunkenness. Unless his insanity was due to sinful drunkenness. Yani, he got drunk sinfully, meaning he knew what he was doing when he did it. And then he got drunk and he lost his mind in the process of this sin. And then he divorced his wife like that. She's divorced. That's out of strictness for him. And the bankrupt person can sell described items. You know what described items means. You can ask if you want to. And he can take loans. And the mukatab slave, he's the one who has a deal with his master to buy his freedom. He owns what he acquires, but he has a weak ownership. Mukatab slave has a weak ownership. Because if he doesn't complete the contract, then whatever he owns will go to his owner, to his master. And the mukatab slave, he can sell and buy. Because how's he going to do his contract? He needs to be able to earn. And he can give his own slave in marriage. A mukatab slave, because he can buy a slave. So it's possible for a slave to have a slave. Not to mention, I'll repeat this for you too, that these rules I'm talking about, this is not special to Muslims too. That's why I'm saying some people, their minds are in a bubble. And then when they hear some things, they would say, this is your religion? This is what you Muslims do? And what that means to them is, this is exclusive to you? No, not necessarily exclusive to Muslims. Just, the world is bigger than what you conceive. So this Mukatab slave, he can buy a slave. And then he can even give his slave woman in marriage. But he can't donate without permission because of the weakness of his ownership. If he breaches his contract, whatever he owns becomes his owner's. So his ownership is incomplete. It's weak. The collateral giver is allowed to use his item without diminishing its value. The collateral giver, that means it's yours. You're the one putting up the collateral. You put your house up for collateral. You put your car up for collateral or something else. It's yours. Doesn't stop being yours, but it becomes a frozen asset, but doesn't mean you can't use it. You can use it as long as this use doesn't diminish its value. Like renting out his house, that doesn't diminish the value. A child, a major sinner, or a blasphemer can take a lost item. So lost and found item, someone might pick it up. What if the child picked it up? Or a kafir picked it up? Then the guardian will take care of it. You say, give it to me, I'll take care of it. Now that you picked it up, you should have left it where it was because you caught. A blasphemer can establish an inalienable endowment. That means a kafir can do a waqf. You know the waqf. That's the dedication. You say, I dedicate this house as a masjid. I dedicate this plot of land as a Muslim cemetery. I dedicate this well for the travelers to drink from it, not to make wudu from it. So this dedication is going to be whatever way you dedicated it. Whatever's your conditions as the dedicator, that's what it's going to become. This is not restricted to a Muslim. If a kafir did a waqf, it will be valid. And an insane woman, she can become a nursing mother. A blind person can authorize what he cannot manage due to blindness. The heirs can permit the execution of a will for more than a third. So you can't give more than a third of your assets as a gift after your death. So let's say, may Allah protect you, you're dying. So you get all your assets in line. Now you know 100% of your assets. This is 100% of my estate. I give 1/3 of this to Fulan after I die. That's your will. You can't go more than a third. And then the rest goes to the heirs. But what if you did leave a will for more than a third? The heirs can block that, or they can approve it. And same thing for a will for an heir. A will for an heir, because the heir already gets money, so you shouldn't put him in your will. But if you did leave a will for an heir, then the other heirs can block that, or they can approve it. Remember, there's a difference between inheritance and will in our religion. The will is a gift after death to someone of your choosing. The inheritance goes to your relatives according to the religious designation. You have no choice in the matter. Who gets what and how much percentage? That's out of all of our hands. Allah Ta'ala took care of that for us. Who's going to inherit? But He gave us the option to give a will, which is a gift after death. This will, it cannot exceed more than a third of his assets. You know that? And this will cannot be for someone who's already an heir. If someone made a will for an heir, then the other heirs can block that, or they can permit it. So the heirs can permit the execution of a will of more than a third, or for an heir. I read it wrong the first time anyway. And finally, a third party can conduct a khula' with a woman's husband. A third party can conduct a khula' with a woman's husband. Means he goes to that man and says to him, how much do you want to release your wife? If he said to him, such and such, like, let's say, keep it easy, like, let's say that's her brother. It's not a man who wants her for himself. Let's say that's her brother or her uncle or someone who was trying to help her. So he goes to her husband and says, Okay, let her go. How much you want? I'll pay it. And then he says, give me such and such. So that's valid. And then that's a khula'. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Any question? Wa alaikum assalam. Yeah, and it's valid for him to do khula' with him. What's his motivations? That's another thing. But if he came to you and said, how much you want to release your wife, then if you name a price, then he can pay it for. He can pay that price to you. And then that's going to be a valid khula'. She will be not your wife now. She's going to start her iddah. Now, because maybe it's not that he wants her for himself. Maybe he wants to help her or something. For example, maybe it's a bad situation. I knew about a case of brother. One brother was married to a woman, and then they had very bad fallout. And woman went gnashes, won't see this man, talk to him, nothing, stays away from him altogether. And the man refused to divorce her also. So then her brother talked to that man, and then her brother paid paid him to release her. طيب. If there's no question, then سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.